Hello and welcome to the first roundtable session of Midday for Mumbai. This is Jane Borges, journalist with Midday. A newspaper born from and committed to the city launches Midday for Mumbai. From reporting exclusive articles and series in Midday that celebrate improvement initiatives to holding roundtable discussions with experts like we're doing today and collaborating with ALMs, government representatives, and specialists to action on ground impact, Midday for Mumbai is an effort to bring about change for the better through ideas, exchange, and debates. We may be on the different sides of today's discussion, but we are all on the side of Mumbai. And what better way to begin than to speak about the future of our city? Our topic today is Mumbai in 2030, world-class city or ad hoc development victim. Mumbai is constantly upgrading its roads and infra. Massive projects like the Mumbai Metro and Coastal Road construction is underway. While they aim to make commute easier and connect the city that's ever growing, critics have been vocal about the damage they will cause to the environment. Are we sacrificing green open spaces and jeopardizing sea faces and promenades in this mission? These are the questions we intend to address via this session. Joining us is an esteemed group of panelists who've been equally invested in Mumbai's development story. Let me introduce our panelists for today. Our first is Mr. Rajiv. Mr. Rajiv is Metropolitan Commissioner, MMRDA, a post he has held since May 2018. He's also known as the modern urban infra man of Mumbai. Manisha Patankar Maiskar is our second panelist. Manisha ji is Principal Secretary for Department of Environment and Climate Change and Principal Secretary and Chief Protocol Officer, General Administration, Department, Government of Maharashtra. She's currently heading several environment initiatives across the state. Our third panelist is Alan Abraham. Alan is a joint principal architect of Mumbai-based Abraham John Architects. He has also been working on urban design solutions to improve the city and make it more green through proactive initiatives such as the Bombay Greenway project. Our fourth panelist is Chirodeep Chaudhary. Chirodeep is a documentary photographer. His work documents the urban landscape, and he has often been referred to as the chronicler of Bombay. Our next panelist, Stalin Dayanand. Stalin is a conservationist based in Mumbai, working with the environmental NGO Vanashakti. He's been championing the cause of wetland conservation and mangrove restoration for over 15 years now. Our sixth panelist today is Dhaval Madhukar Shah. Dhaval is the founding director of Andheri Lokhandwala Oshiwara Citizens Association, which deals in a wide gamut of issues from civic, environment, social, and infrastructure. And finally, we have Ranjit Jadhav. Ranjit is special correspondent with Midday, but he's also a conservationist. He undertook the camera trapping exercise to monitor leopard activity in RA Milk Colony, which he visits almost every day. Thank you so much, each one of you, for making time to be part of today's session. I'd like to begin with Alan. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Jane. Thank you for having us.
Alan, my question to you is, we know of your efforts with Bombay Greenway. And one of the main initiatives of the not-for-profit has been to sensitize government authorities about the relationship of people with the sea. The BMC, as Bombay Greenway had pointed out, is reclaiming 95 hectares of land, 180 meters wide on average, to build a 35-meter wide coastal road. In the past, your nonprofit has suggested several tweaks to this project, solutions that you say are feasible. What is your biggest grouse with the current coastal road plan?
There are a couple of them. The basic concept is actually defeating. So while the city does require roads, it requires roads where the city is, and the city is on land, it's not in the sea. So that's the basic concept, right? I mean, if you have a house, we architects too, we design for you. So we put what you need, where you need it. And we need the good roads where we are in the city. There is some kind of fallacy running around that development cannot be sustainable. Development can be sustainable. And there's also a thing that the government is against the people is against government. It sounds kind of silly because the government is of the people, by the people, right? So it should actually work in tandem. But the idea, I think, what happens very often is people think of big projects and they don't think of the actual problem and solution And very often smaller solutions can solve bigger problems. So putting a road out in the sea is kind of silly. It's the same with the MSRDC now, the VVSL. They're building a 9.8-kilometer road in the sea. And to connect that road, which is 1 kilometer out in the sea, they're building another 8.6 kilometers of connector roads. So you're actually building twice as much because your road is actually way out in the sea. And the same number of roads and the same size of those roads could benefit the city much better within. And we've got terrible roads in the city, we can't pretend. I mean, like, you step outside your gate, it's bad. So the basic concept is defeating. However, if you do go about reclaiming so much, which as anyone knows, it's environmentally damaging, you don't need a PhD in this to kind of understand all this. You're going into the sea, you're covering up things, you're reclaiming stuff. You're going to have some kind of impact, right? You're going to push the water is going to come back. World over, they're doing coastal protection barriers, like in New York and all, because obviously the businesses, including Bombay or Mumbai, there's a lot of work that's happening and you want to protect your city. So you could use this whole coastal reclamation thing as a kind of a coastal and tidal resilience built up kind of, to protect the city rather than just for a road. And if you do need a road, you need the road again closer to the city than afar. So you'd rather build a road close to the city and keep the open spaces by the sea where they should be. Logically speaking, you should be having open waterfronts. So in the design of the coastal road, say for example, you do want a coastal road and you are going to reclaim, then you could do the same thing in a much better way. First conclusion is, yes, the project is silly and stupid, but if we are going to go through with this silly, stupid project, it can be done in so many better ways because the problem is in the name. If you call it a coastal road, it's not a road project, it's a whole area development. Okay, so you need to address that. And because you're calling it a road, you're kind of saying the road has to be out there. Then what happens in the in-between areas? Today, if you go to Bandra Valley Sea Link, the entire seafront is locked up. The entire promenade is locked up. So this is what we're going to get. We're going to get a city full of locked up seafronts, minuscule promenades, and the open space that was created with the Bandra Valley Sea Link in the reclaimed part, which is the huge part at Bandra Reclamation, is 20 years down the line. It's full of yards. It's got your metro yards there. It's got other offices there. MSRDC's offices are there. There are no open spaces. So the promised open spaces have never materialized for the city. And you could have beautiful waterfront open spaces. So what we see is a future disaster. And what we are trying to do through our small interventions is saying, hey, if you're reclaiming 180 meters for a 35-meter road, put the 35-meter road towards the land where it's more useful rather than towards the sea where it is less useful. Because the open space, if towards the sea, would be far more useful for 21 million citizens. And that same space could be used for coastal and tidal resilience, which means it can be used to protect the city from your surges, your floods, your tsunamis, whatever might happen. And the city does need protection. So you can develop without destroying the environment if you must. And there is plenty of space to build in Bombay, and there are plenty of open spaces. The problem is everything's locked up and inaccessible. That's the problem. So you need a few tweaks and they make big differences.
Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you. I'd like to move on here to Chirodeep because you put up a post on Instagram calling out to your followers, asking them if they knew friends from whose homes one could view sections of the Coastal Road project, which is a work in progress, because you'd like to take pictures from there. I'd like to break this question of mine in two parts. First, what are you hoping to document here, Chirodeep? And second, what compelled you to do it?
One of the things that occupies my mind is, over the last 25 years that I've been an active photographer, a journalist, and an observer of the city, that how much of the city around me is changing. But I mean, that we all know. But what's interesting to me is that how much of it we have forgotten, how much of it that we can remember. For instance, I recently came across a photograph, I think on social media, a photograph of Powai. Okay. And I remember as kids, I mean, whenever somebody said Powai, our first association was with the IIT. Okay. For instance, if you remember the Monopoly game, I mean, it used to have a picture of, the lake. Today, when you talk to people, the younger generation about Powai, they usually think it's Hiranandan. So the thing that I find interesting, I mean, as a documentary photographer, is say in another 20 years or say in another 30 years, how would we be remembering our city? Okay, like I remember having been commissioned by Sharda Dwivedi, I think this was in 1999, to work on a book on the Muslim neighborhoods of Bombay. That book never happened. But I remember starting to photograph Mohammad Ali Road and hearing the first rumblings of, I mean, literally the rumblings of, the drills and stuff, and the bridge kind of coming up. And it was, I have photographs in a moment of panic. I remember getting into double-decker buses and going up and down, and from the front of the bus kind of photographing that particular road. Those photographs are now kind of historic because the younger generation, I mean, I've shown it to my students and stuff. They can hardly believe this, what that road was. And I think this is what my interest really is as a photographer. And, what I would like to see is a more, for instance, a more concerted effort documenting the city. And I think we are terrible in general at documenting. There could be a plan for this whole thing, but I'm saying it's this documenting, not the kind of ad hoc documentation that is done by, say, through newspaper stories or, photographers here and there and stuff, but a more concerted effort at, say, documenting the city. There was a project called the Farm Security Administration project in America. This came up in the 1930s when the Depression happened. And, a whole battery of photographers had been deployed by the government of that time to go out and document the city and to understand the impacts of, say, new technology that was being introduced in farming, the impact of the Depression, and so on and so forth. So I think, I mean, this is the sort of thing that I would really love to see happen. And this is like say a 20-year project, including so much work that is happening, right? I mean, the coastal road, as we were talking about, the metro, flyovers coming up. I mean, Lower Parel happened suddenly when we were not looking, so to speak. So has this at all been documented in, say, the last decade of say 2000? What are the kind of photographs? What is the kind of continuity in this that would exist if we are telling the story of Bombay? We have these old vintage photographs, which are very lovely and all that. Is there a photographic record of, for instance, say BKC coming up? I had an office in BKC, many years back in the ICICI building. There was nothing there. There was ICICI and there was the Citibank building. There was nothing, and suddenly this entire thing has come up. Has there been any kind of, documentation of this? So I think the Haji Ali thing really came out of that. I mean, it's at a very formative stage. But I mean, I'm hoping that I would be able to, make it make regular trips and probably photograph that stretch. I mean, you could do this, across the city. But I'm saying in my limited capacity, I mean, I thought Haji Ali would be a good place to begin. Because I think it bothered me the most. I mean, of course, Marine Drive bothers me. Worli Seaface bothers me as well, but somehow Haji Ali kind of gave me one punch in the face, and it kind of really shocked me to kind of see, that view of that, what is an iconic view of the city kind of just disappear. Does that answer your questions, Jane? I mean, yeah.
Yes, it does. It does, Chirodeep. Thank you so much for documenting. And 20 years down the lane, like we saw with your Bombay clocks, I'm sure we're going to see how the city has slowly changed.
When we were doing the clocks project, one of the very fascinating things that was coming out was when we went out and started interviewing people about, do they remember what are their memories of the clocks? Of course, some stories were about the clocks, but I think what it did was it uncorked people's memories, about how they remembered the city. And I think this is what is fascinating me, how would we remember our city? Like, say, 30 years down the line, 40 years down the line, or maybe much later. I mean, that is hoping we'll all survive the pollution and things like that so much later. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chirodeep. Mr. Rajiv, the next question is for you. We're talking about coastal road. We're talking about infra projects. We know that Mumbai is currently a work in progress with several infra projects, the metro, the mono, the coastal road underway. The infra push, many feel, is skewed towards the rich and the privileged. And one of the foremost complaints that I keep hearing from urban planners is that Why aren't we doing enough to make the city more walkable and pedestrian friendly? I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Let me tell you that though I am the first generation Mumbaiker, I've started career in Maharashtra. So I'm the first generation. Before joining service, believe me, I had not come to Mumbai. Then I worked in municipal corporation twice, and then I've been working in MMRDA. I can assure you that I'm not a less lover of Mumbai than anybody else who has spent generations and generations today in Mumbai. So with this alibi, let me tell you that the infrastructure projects which at present getting implemented, be it municipal corporation, and I feel bad that no one representing municipal corporation is here. And we coastal road projects and the adverse effect of coastal road projects. I wish someone who is implementing project there like Ashwani should have been here on the panel. But having said that, since I have worked in municipal corporation, I owe something to speak on that behalf, because initially the idea of coastal road was initiated when I was additional municipal commissioner. So I also owe something on that count to talk about it. Though the designs have really gone a lot of changes when it came for implementation. It was not the way we conceived it initially. So there are changes in that. Basic topic is that how Mumbai will be in 2030. So any transformation which happens in any city, and believe me, we are really going through a very, very interesting and exciting phase in the city's history so far as Mumbai is concerned. I can compare it with one of those days when all the 7 islands were being connected by the Britishers. We do not talk about that. We do not talk that time also sea was reclaimed by the Britishers. Though I still believe that the Dutch were better engineers, they should not have given this island to the Britishers. They would have done it better as they have done for Amsterdam. Instead of reclaiming sea, they have created canals, and that stops Amsterdam, though it is lower than the sea level, from getting submerged during floods and monsoons. So something of that sort should have been done for Mumbai, but that's history. Now, I should tell you that coastal road being implemented by municipal corporation, or be it the sea links being implemented by MSRDC, or be it 337 kilometer of metro lines being implemented by MMRDA, the Mumbai Trans Harbour Link, the Worli-Shivdi connector, which we are doing it, everything is falling in a jigsaw puzzle, and the picture which will emerge by 2030 will not certainly be an ad hoc victimization of Mumbai, but it will certainly be a world-class city by then. Any such transformation and a large scale transformation of this nature, and that too in Mumbai, where I see that we perform open heart surgeries when the man is not given anesthesia. Okay, the city roads are functioning, the traffic is functioning. We do not close a single road for a single day when we are constructing metro in the heart of the cities. Having all these things, all these constraints, through that, in and through that, we are doing all these infrastructures. The first metro line came after 10 years in this city, but that is not going to be so with the present metro lines. All these metro lines, nobody knew about COVID 2020. It has gone, and again, it has raised its head. We do not know this uncertainty. My labor force is getting sick again in large numbers. If we remove all these uncertainties, we have not overstepped so far as time is concerned, so far as budget is concerned for metro projects, neither for Mumbai Trans Harbour Link, which is the longest sea bridge in India, 22 kilometers. But all these are certainly going to fall in a jigsaw puzzle and will certainly transform by 2030 Mumbai into very, very livable city. We are also working for WEH and EH. Somebody was talking about the pedestrianizations, the pedestrians, the cycle tracks, where we started developing cycle tracks in BKC. At one point of time, the first phase of cycle track, when it was developed, nobody was using cycle. At present, in BKC, lot of people every day, at least 10,000 people are using cycles. The Yulu cycle, which has become very, very famous in city, and that was introduced in BKC. In addition to that, 3 metro stations, we have introduced public sharing cycles in western suburbs, and they are being used on daily basis. Now, since people are using cycles, they need cycle tracks. And I said that cyclists, you go on the road and reclaim your space. I should say that all the stakeholders, be it government, be it central government, be it state government, be it local government, and the civil society, everyone has to come together to change Mumbai. So Western Express Highway, Eastern Express Highway, in addition to making it access controlled, with the whole DPR is ready, we are also introducing cycle tracks and pedestrian movement on Western Express Highway and Eastern Express Highway. All along the Western Express Highway and Eastern Express Highway, which are with MMRDA, will be introducing. And I'm told that Municipal Corporation is also thinking to link all these cycle tracks and improve cycle movement in this city, which makes the first and last mile connectivity with all the metros coming up in the city. This year, 2 metro lines we are getting inaugurated. So every year, 1 metro line will get added to it. Mumbai, all said and done, is a public transport city. Most of the people, 80 lakh people every day travel by locals in a very crushed density. But by the time all these metro lines will get ready, 1 crore 20 lakh people capacity will get created in metros. The whole ease of movement, ease of commute in Mumbai will get very, very comfortable. There will be ease of commute. And with that, the cycle track and the pedestrianizations, all the private car owners will go on coastal road, will go on Sea Link, and your city will certainly be much better off by that time. I have paucity of time. I can counter each and every point of yours. Believe me, be it the environmentalists, be it the others, they all know that I stood by them on so many issues. Where Manisha is sitting today, I have also worked there, which you did not mention. I've worked as Environment Secretary also. Yes. So environment is very close to my heart. There are things which are very glamorous, about which everybody talks about, the NGOs talk about. Nobody talks about keep the city clean. I was the first person who did it and who started the Clean Up Mumbai campaign in this city. Make America Beautiful campaign under President Johnson's period in US started about keeping America not only clean, but also beautiful. But how many times, except the present Prime Minister, nobody has talked about at the top about the cleanliness in the country and in the cities and in the states. We talk about so many other things, but we do not talk about cleanliness, which is the primary thing for making any city livable and affordable for people. What I am at present doing is not only for the rich people, what you talked about.
No, I said there's criticism.
I'm also working for the public transport. I'm also working for the cycle tracks. I'm also working for the pedestrian idea. And I stand by that.
So let's hope that in the coming years, the jigsaw puzzle fits together and the city looks at least close to perfect.
No city is perfect. See, if city becomes perfect, it's a dying city. Okay. The city always evolves.
Yes, true.
Always evolves over a period of time. We should not remain in the past. We should not remain always in the future. But any city and every city always evolves over a period of time with the people. And that's how the city becomes livable and lovable.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your thoughts. You were talking about stakeholders and how, along with the government, local authorities, we also need citizens to play an active role. And that brings me to the next question for Stalin. You have been one of the forces behind the Save RA campaign. And your relentless efforts finally, yours and that of other activists, finally met with success when the metro car shed shifted out of RA colony last year. Do you feel, Stalin, that citizens' movements like this can be real game changers for us in the future?
Yeah, it's a historic battle. That's a battle which the world will remember, where citizens from all walks of life stood shoulder to shoulder and said, "These are our forests, you will not touch them." And there's a message for the government also. And these conflicts could have been easily avoided, and they can be easily avoided in future also. All that we say is that whenever you envisage a project, right at the planning stage itself, calling the environmental lobbies, take their objections or their concerns into consideration, and then go ahead. What is happening today is that projects are conceived by civil engineers. Now, it's not their fault. You tell a civil engineer, I want a road from point A to point B, he will draw it for you and he will start working on it. But you have to appraise him of those challenges. See, I had officially asked the CMO's office that please give me the name of the scientists who are advising you on your projects. And the reply was, there is no such post. So obviously you're going to have a conflict situation later on. Now, once you start a project, then people start fighting. Then you find someone to justify what you are doing, like it was done for the coastal road. No Mumbaikar was ever told that the road was going to destroy coral colonies. How many Mumbaikars know today that there are coral colonies on the coast of Mumbai? Why wasn't this shown to the people? What prevents us from showcasing our biodiversity? And like Mr. Rajiv said, the plans of the coastal road went a complete change. It is not what it was supposed to be. In fact, way back in 2012, I had written to the ministries saying that please don't reclaim the land. If you're hell-bent on doing it, do it on stilts. But nothing was heard. And once this notion that is inbuilt into the system, that destruction of nature is inevitable and has to happen for a project, that has to change. I'm challenging, or I'm putting forth my 2 Ps on this, saying that every project you want to do, you can do it without destroying the environment. And that's a very strong statement to make. You have to have the desire to spend a little more money. Here, it is a case where we think that money is difficult to spend, but environment is cheaper to destroy. And that attitude needs to change. So people's movement, coming back to what you had asked, people's movement makes all the difference. It's because not just Mumbaikar, the entire country, and it became a worldwide movement. Save RA. See, I wouldn't say that it was never an ego issue. We never objected to the metro. We said, fine, you want to make the metro, fine. Don't tell us that a service station has to come up inside a forest. That was the only point of dispute. But if people raise their voice, now the government will be twice wary before embarking on such things. So in a way, citizens have expressed an opinion, and it is wrong to even see them as obstructionists. There is no one who's obstructing. And we've been trying for a dialogue with the government right from 2014, but that dialogue never happened. If we can speak to each other, we can always find a way. It is like, I will not talk to you. And that attitude only brings up conflict. So in the case of RA, coming back to RA, see, we were initially branded as a group of English-speaking activists. But don't forget, when the trees were being cut, the tribals were the first one to rush into the site and stop it. They stood side by side. Every section of society, homemakers standing with their children in pouring rain for kilometers, long human chains, getting arrested, getting criminal charges put on them. These have all resulted in nothing. If the government wishes, everything can happen very smoothly, and that's what we are saying. Just talk to the citizens, to get everyone on board. It can happen. Nothing. There is no confrontation here. Mr. Rajiv has shown a nice plan for Mumbai. By 2030, we will have a good metro network. That's a fantastic achievement for us. But where are we? There are so many issues. Maybe I can come into that later on. There are so many issues which need to be answered. And Mr. Rajiv, I think, is due for retirement. Ms. Manisha will be there for a long time, and we might be engaging in a lot of conflict over how to protect and why to protect. But all said and done, we are hopeful that this government is more sensitive towards conservation. And so we hope that some parts of Mumbai's natural heritage will be saved, and we won't become a city without any kind of a directionless city. It should not happen. It cannot go into one direction. You have to, when you're expanding your infrastructure, have you made provisions for ensuring that the natural spaces are kept inviolate? Has it been kept? I'll just, the last point I'll tell you, I'll just give you an example. The Forest Survey of India had declared in 2019 that Mumbai suburban has 4,500 hectares of forests, apart from the national park and apart from mangroves. Not a single department in this government has, or the earlier governments has bothered to find out where these forests are. We have so many forests left in the city. Just protect those, use it for ecotourism. Hell, let the city breathe also, no? We need the glamour, no doubt, but we need Mother Earth, also, nature also with us. So that's all. We need to find that balance, and that can happen only if you start talking to the people. There is no ego issue here. I always said that we are always willing to go to any extent to show that we are not trying to fight anyone in the government. We just want their dialogue. We can talk over it. Provided everyone listens to each other, we can always find a way out.
Great. Thank you so much, Stalin. And, an extension of your work is something that Dhaval and his friends in Lokhandwala did recently. Dhaval, because you are part of the association and you have seen this kind of destruction happen, what do you have to say when people, accuse societies, organizations of putting out these PILs which are not development friendly?
Usually, we primarily focus on development which is coexistence in nature. For example, there's not destruction of the green space. It is it can be run parallel to the green space. You can protect the green space and continue with development. For example, we had people wanting to develop the Lokhandwala Lake, which we are against because we don't want our Lokhandwala Lake to become like Mandra Talao, a concrete jungle. So we wrote letters to the respected authorities that we don't want any such development, beautification, any garb of beautification, any such words to be used, and environmental green spaces to be disturbed. The issue with us is that Andheri is one of the largest, in terms of weight, in terms of population, in terms of density, everything. We are one of the largest in Mumbai city. The KWS ward is one of the largest in the city. We have a lot of issues with our particular area, and if I compare it with other areas as well, like entire Andheri belt, which is several kilometers long, has only one fire station, which is in Irla. And example, areas like Versova, Lokhandwala, Oshiwara, and all these belts which have massive population, there is no, for the fire engine to reach these places, it takes a hell of a long time. So any development like the topic which we are currently on of ad hoc development or planned development, design and development has to be on a long-term basis, where like Stalin Bhai said that public has to be involved in the decision-making process. And like example, I'll give example of Mumbai Metro Line 6 public hearing. The people the officials who had come there had no clue for the questions that we had put up. If example like Line 1, if there is a connectivity with Western Line, we can have very good ridership numbers. So, for example, Line 6, there is no talk on having a skywalk connected to the Western Railway, although it is about 400, 500 meters away. We still can have a skywalk connecting it to Western Railway, by which the ridership can increase, the connectivity can increase, people can use that line a little bit more. Like we have a lot of such issues. Like example, like instead of big ticket issues, which like projects like the coastal road. If there are so many pending infrastructure projects like Versova, Lokhandwala, the bridge, the Bal Thackeray flyover, which is stuck since 10 years. The extension of Bal Thackeray flyover is stuck since 10 years, where there's a landfall point, only 100-meter construction is left, 100 or 200-meter construction is left, but it's not getting completed. Like in all these projects which are happening all over the city, there is no concerted thought put behind of having ducting which can stop the roads and this project being dug again and again for cable laying, rainwater drainage, for sewage lines, and there is no time-based restrictions on these development projects. A lot of projects get delayed inordinately and cost overrun happens, and the only people who are paying are the taxpayers, and only people who are suffering are the taxpayers. Like I'll give you an example of SV Road, where the Mogra Nala was encroached, the width was reduced, and the flow angle was changed for a building called Millionaire. And in Lokhanda also, Runwal Elegant Building was, constructed, part of the Nala flow chain was, the design was changed to accommodate that building. So all these kind of, changes are something which are detrimental in the long run and leads to flooding and, destruction of public property in terms of roads and the time wasted by the common citizen to travel and the, closure of roads in adverse weather, conditions thanks to these changes. There's no accountability of the project. For example, in Lonavala, I just saw that there's a big board in each, small areas of the project, person who has carried out this project. So if such, boards are made where common citizens can come to know who is in charge of this area, who is in charge of this project which are being completed. Also, payments, in our city are a joke, as you are aware, it is most of the payments are encroached. So the pavement construction also has to be such that, it should not be future hawker friendly. It has to be pedestrian friendly. Like payments are made every alternate year or every year by, the municipality. I don't know why can't they make something which can last for good 5 years at least. And if you have to break that footpath again, there should be accountability and multiple provisions should be, enforced that to break open a road or a footpath or to be remade. There should be such stringent norms that such wastage of taxpayers' money, should be curtailed.
Thank you, Dhaval. Thank you. Manisha ji, I was mentioning there's a study published by Nature Communications which claimed that Mumbai, especially the south, the islands in the south, were at the risk of being submerged by 2050. The article obviously was cautioning coastal communities, worldwide and how they must prepare themselves for difficult times. Has the government considered this impending threat to Mumbai, especially since more and more parts of the city are experiencing unprecedented waterlogging during monsoons?
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Midday, for this opportunity to present what government thinks on issues that inevitably has passionate arguments on both sides. Jane, the larger issue that you raised right at the beginning, what would Mumbai be in 2030? I would like to say that if things go as planned and if more efforts are made, I see Mumbai as a world-class, sustainable, livable city, which is also consciously thinking of carbon neutrality. I think a point has come in the city's life when the city should make conscious efforts about carbon neutrality also. So yes, I will also answer your question eventually. But why do I think that Mumbai would be a city which would have become more livable? I think the first major thing which will change by 2030 is the mobility issue. Mr. R.A. Rajiv, MC MMRDA, has expressed at length, but a lot of exciting things are happening in Mumbai's mobility. One, of course, is the coastal road and the metro network. These are the mega public transportation projects. But also what is happening is the last mile connectivity, which is being thought of very consciously, because unless last mile connectivity is thought of, people who have been using their private vehicles for years together are not really going to switch over to metro. But one thing I would really like to point out here, which will be shortly in the public domain as a policy, is the government's new EV policy. Actually, also one thing that is also going to be a game changer, I think, in the next 10 years is this whole focus on EVs. And not just on four-wheeler EVs, but on two-wheeler EVs. And this two-wheeler EVs could actually also help us achieve the last mile connectivity, which is so very essential for making the metro network more user-friendly and broad-based. So I think the first dramatic change which is going to happen is the mobility, which is going to be green, which is going to be shared, and which is going to be sustainable, according to me, by 2030, if all goes as per a plan. The second point, which would also happen side by side, is the conscious effort, which not just the government, but all of us need to make in improving the city's green cover. Mr. Stalin mentioned a lot about RA. and the department has been studying few of the developments about RA, and I think it is worthwhile to mention that in the first 60 years, RA forest lost about 40% of the green cover to various deforestation projects. But now what has happened in the last year is that 800 acres, the remaining RA, 800 acres has become protected forest, which means once they come under the Forest Act, they have now become protected. But just one RA, protecting one RA is not going to be sufficient. I think what the city is going to need very, very consciously is to ensure that we have more urban forests. Whatever little patches are available, we have more urban forests there. We have more vertical greens. We have more Miyawaki. I mean, the options could be many, but what needs to be very consciously done is to ensure that the city's green cover also increases. Which, Jane, brings me to the question that you asked me very specifically. We have all been discussing climate change issues. I think all of us are currently facing a heat wave. I mean, last couple of days, Mumbai was never as bad as it has been in the last couple of days, and we are not even in April. So this heat wave, climate change, climate resilience, all the issues that we discuss are, according to me, very, very closely linked, or they are actually highly interrelated. How does a city become carbon resilience? If one has to put it in a kind of equation, on the one hand, one has to make efforts of reducing the emissions. On the other hand, one has to make efforts of very consciously increasing carbon absorption or carbon sequestration, which is actually what greening the city is all about. So how does one make or ensure that there is reduction in emissions over the days, over the years? From where do our major emissions come? One is, of course, the kind of transportation that we are presently having, which is largely private car based. So my first point, that as the city moves towards green, shared and sustainable mobility, a significant amount of these emissions is going to come down. On the other hand, if the city is to move towards very consciously increasing the green cover, then the scope for carbon absorption, that is also going to improve. And another thing is the point which Mr. Rajiv made is one very basic thing for any kind of sustainable or livable future for any city is how the city treats its liquid and solid waste. All thanks to our Prime Minister's Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, I think now all the cities and communities have realized the importance of basically the 4 R's: reuse, recycle, and whatever is possible, reclaim. But as the city of Mumbai, and again, it is not a magic wand. It doesn't happen in a day or by just moving a wand. But if the city is to make very conscious efforts in the next 10 years towards establishing a circular ecosystem for both its solid waste and liquid waste, which is by reusing, recycling, reclaiming the solid and the liquid wastes, I think that is also going to help us in ensuring that the emissions come down, and therefore the city can, of course, build itself up towards becoming more and more climate resilient. One thing which I think was mentioned earlier by all the panelists in their earlier discussion is the importance of mangroves, the importance of wetlands, and the importance of marshlands. The department is actually currently doing a study as to, we famously had the Queen's necklace earlier, And there was also mention about the whole classical Queen's necklace is now looking a little battered because of the work in progress. But we are consciously talking about a green necklace around the islands of Mumbai. Now the talk has largely been about preserving or protecting our mangroves. But we are into this study as to whether a green necklace of mangrove plantation along the city's coastline, whether this is going to make the city of Mumbai more flood proof, whether it is going to make the city of Mumbai more climate resilient. And I think one another thing that has happened between the revenue and the forest department, I must make a mention of it, is that all the mangroves have now been transferred to the forest department. I can see Mr. Stalin shaking his head. So a good bit of mangroves are in the process of being transferred. And once I correct my English, I can now see Mr. Stalin kind of nodding. So the process of transferring the mangroves, which never happened for longish time, has now begun. Once the mangroves come into the ambit of the Forest Protection Act, they really get protected. But also, I think what needs to be studying, which we are doing now, is whether a conscious development of an emerald necklace along the city's coastline, whether it is going to make us more climate resilience. I think we are certainly looking at that. Another thing I actually also need to mention, as the state's Secretary for Environment and Climate Change, is the need to find a balance. I think everywhere in the world, in all the world-class cities that you mentioned, all the economies which are world-class, they have finally realized that infra development and environment cannot be in adversarial roles. So long as they are in adversarial roles, there will always be this conflict, and this conflict is not going to help either the city or its people. And therefore, what is necessary to find is a balance between all the infra development that is happening, the metro, the coastal road, the connector, and all that. So, is the need to find the balance between sustainability and infrastructure development. Is to also realize that the two are not adversarial, but it is not going to happen just because I'm saying it. Very conscious efforts are required to be made to ensure that whatever development happens, a very conscious thought is also given to preserving the green, to preserving the ecosystem. At this point, I'm not in a position to elaborate it more, but very soon you will see from the department a whole concept of heritage trees, and a whole concept which will be introduced to protect heritage trees. If the infrastructural agencies want to build certain infrastructure, but at the same time, if that is going to impact on a heritage part of our ecosystem, then there would probably have to be thought of as options. But I think it is still a policy which is in progress. It will soon be out in the public domain. But till now, I would only want to say that the department is also thinking of preserving, protecting very proactively heritage trees. In the final word, I would really want to say that we would have to come to a point where we need to strike a balance between infrastructural development, which is so essential, and between sustainability and conserving, protecting the Mother Earth, which is actually the core to our existence. Thank you. I hope I am, in broad terms, able to answer your question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you again. We have our final panelists now, Ranjit, before we will open this to questions from the audience. Ranjit, we've been speaking about the city and its relationship with the people, but something that we have conveniently forgotten is the city's relationship with its wildlife, and Mumbai has its own fair share. Ranjit, this question is for you. Because of your involvement with leopards, I want to understand if you feel that Mumbai's wildlife currently is in grave danger, and why so?
So basically, I will talk with Sanjay Gandhi National Park, as I have been covering wildlife and environment. So I had a chance to interact with people and researchers doing work in Sanjay Gandhi National Park. And the interesting thing is that Sanjay Gandhi National Park, which is spread across 104 square kilometers, it has one of the highest densities of leopards anywhere in the world. So this is something which is very important in terms of conservation. So when we talk about various infrastructure projects which are coming up, there is no doubt, as a journalist, because I also cover infrastructure, there is no doubt that we need projects, we need road projects, we need metros, because it is going to help people. It is going to help people who are traveling. But at the same time, the most important point, which is sometimes ignored, is the fact that some linear infrastructure projects, they pose a huge threat to the wildlife. For example, we can talk about the roads around the periphery of Sanjay Gandhi National Park or in RML Colony, the Mumbai-Ahmedabad highway, which were widened. It has really helped the commuters or people traveling. But what we fail to understand is the fact that these linear infrastructure projects, when they were planned, there were no proper mitigation measures which were there in place, because of which there is a study by researchers which says that more than from 2008 till today, till 2021, more than 25 leopards have died while crossing highways. So when we say that the roads are important, I think the implementing agencies, for example, the NHAI or MMRDA or MSRDC, they need to talk with the forest department officials to understand where the animals cross roads. There needs to be underpasses, overpasses for safe passage of animals. So recently, everyone must be aware that there were two leopards which were radio collared in Sanjay Gandhi National Park. And one of the male leopard, which was radio collared on the periphery of the park, it has traveled all the way from Sanjay Gandhi National Park to Tungareshwar Wildlife Sanctuary in Vasai, crossing the Diva Vasai railway tracks, Bhivandi Chinsoti Road. And what was very interesting to know through this study was that there are certain points on this highways, the Chinchoti Bhivandi highway, where the leopard had to stop for a few minutes to cross the road. So I think while implementing such projects, if there is a dialogue between the forest department officials and the agencies which are constructing roads or highways, it would really help for wildlife. So that is one thing. And when we talk about RA also has a similar biodiversity which we find in Sanjay Gandhi National Park. And this has come to light through a report which was prepared by two researchers who have been working in RA. So the government has done a good thing by protecting the RML colony, because it has a breeding leopard population. As I have been volunteering in the forest department work for monitoring leopards in RA, it is very fascinating to know that there is a breeding population which is there. There is a female leopard known Luna who has been staying in RA for almost 6 years, and she has given birth to around 8 to 9 cubs in RA. So we need to protect such spaces, but at the same time, the another threat which RA is facing is through some projects which are coming up. So we read in newspapers that there are certain projects which are going to come in RA. So we had to plan everything in a proper way. There has to be a balance which needs to be maintained.
Great, Ranjit. Thank you so much. Thank you, each one of you, for sharing your thoughts. There's so much for us to learn from each other and from these conversations. Our audience has share of their own questions, their own grouse with the administration, maybe with the kind of life, the quality of life they're living. I'll put the question out. You can raise your hand and we can have that done accordingly. And this question has come from one follower of ours on Twitter, who has asked, are we going to reclaim more land for creating new real estate?
I don't think. The simple answer is no. If someone is saying that land is being reclaimed for real estate, maybe somewhere some encroachments are taking place, some filling of land is taking place, some slumlords are doing slums and later on getting it with the intention of getting it. But this is all illegal so far as government policy is concerned. So far as government plans are concerned, no land is going to be reclaimed for real estate.
Manisha ji, maybe you can weigh in here, because I remember we had, I had gone to Borivali. A decent part of the mangroves there have been encroached illegally, of course, by slum dwellers. What is the government hoping to do with something like this, encroachment by slums and generally, people?
So, firstly, I would second Mr. Rajiv. Because when the whole coastal road project was being debated, it also came to the MCZMA for CRZ clearance, the coastal zone clearance. And one thing which weighed in favor of coastal road was the larger public interest aspect. So I think unless there is a very large and significant public interest involved in the project, there is not going to be any more reclamation for real estate, the question you put it. But the question to me more specifically was about the gradual destruction of mangroves by slumlords and other antisocial elements. So that is why it was very important to begin the process of transferring these mangroves to the Forest Department, who have the mandate to ensure that the mangroves are protected. Now the process of transferring the mangroves to Forest Department has not only begun, it is well underway, and the whole issue of encroachment is so evolved, is so complex. But very consciously, the local authority, which is the BMC and the Forest Department together, would need to protect the mangroves. And I think there is now a very increasing consciousness about the role that the mangroves play in the whole concept of flood-proofing the city. So in a way, you can say that if the mangroves survive, the city survives. It is importance to that level. So I think there is going to be a very large focus to ensure that whatever mangroves remain are protected. Thank you.
I would like to come in here.
Yes, Talon, please.
I am in slight variation with Mr. Rajiv and Ms. Manisha ma'am that there won't be any reclamation. All the salt pans in Mumbai which are active today are intertidal areas. I will take them to each and every salt pan to show that the tide water comes in naturally. When you talk about natural floodplains, these salt pans cannot be touched. But MMRDA has already conducted their surveys for construction on salt pan lands. So the fact that no salt pan lands will be touched, if that is coming through, there is nothing more happier for us to celebrate. The city will not flood so long as those salt pans are left untouched. So if MMRDA is not going to reclaim any salt pan, then we are in a very safe zone. So that is something which should be clear. When we talk of reclamation, let us not think that it's reclaiming the sea. The sea has its influence zone also, which needs to be protected. Manisha ma'am meant three important statements she made. One, marshes, wetlands, and mangroves. These are not to be seen in isolation. All these have to be conserved together if we are to remain flood-free. The answer to preventing the city from falling prey to floods is not building a wall along the coastline, but to leave your natural floodplains intact. So no reclamation, that's a great news. And I thank Mr. Rajiv if he's commenting on this. Thank you so much.
Mr. Rajiv, would you like to weigh in there or say something?
MMRDA is not deciding about salt pan lands. He's wrong to say, he's mistaken that MMRDA is deciding, MMRDA is doing any survey of that. The survey is being done by MMRDA certainly, but it is at the instructions and orders of Government of India. We are doing survey, we are submitting reports to Government of India. It's finally for the Government of India, central government, to take decision about it. Number one. Number two, if it is in CRZ1 and mostly all the salt pan lands are in CRZ1, nothing is going to happen to that. I will not like to speak much more on that, but nothing is in the hand of MMRDA so far as salt pan land is concerned. We cannot even take Kanjurmarg land so far for
That's a different story.
You know,
that's a different.
No, we are asking for it, which is not a salt pan land. Which is not a salt pan land.
Correct, agreed.
But that also we have not been able to take it.
So no real estate on salt pans. That's great news from Mr. Rajiv today.
That is no. I'm not. I'm saying that it is in the hands of Government of India about that. We are only submitting report, and so far as CRZ1 is concerned, nothing is going to come on that. CRZ1, Manisha is the protector of that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rajiv. Our next question is about open spaces. It's a generic statement somebody has put out on Twitter. What are we doing about our open spaces? Why isn't anyone taking that into account? Maybe I feel Alan can begin because Bombay Greenway, Bombay Collective, I think they are very invested in open spaces. So can you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks. So I'll just continue with the last statement first and then
Sure.
come to this.
Yes,
so you don't
sure.
need to necessarily reclaim land to develop real estate. But let's look at the coastal road, for example. There's reclamation. What used to be, what would be the most expensive property in Bombay? You'd say, oh, South Bombay. And in South Bombay, where would be the most expensive property? On the west coast. By the sea is the most expensive property always. So the easiest way to develop is to develop land over there. It doesn't exist. Now, for example, you may have a mandate that says, I'm not going to develop this land. It's going to stay open. Okay? But what you're doing basically is the land which used to be under CRZ1 now no longer is, because you got a road 200 meters away. Come on. So you've basically opened a gold mine of development all along the seafront, existing seafront. It's a gold mine of development, which means buildings that couldn't go up suddenly can go really tall. I mean, this is like logic. Yeah, it's like very basic. Tomorrow, if the government changes, the government which today protected RA at the expense of last government, whatever, the next government can easily overturn an open space policy between two roads. I mean, you look at a coastal road that's 200 meters away, and you look at a main road of Haji Ali that's like, I mean, or any other road alongside, Wali Seaface. Wali Seaface is already a coastal road. Haji Ali is already a coastal road, you know? So, I mean, there's a little logic missing in that entire concept. And now, if you talk about open spaces, number one, as of now, Bandra reclamation open space is still locked up. Cycle tracks in BKC are not really being used. I'm sorry, because BKC is a failure in terms of planning, because BKC has landed up in Bombay getting flooded. And it's a copy of Nariman Point being only a business area. It's not a mixed use area. It's a planning disaster. Because you're not creating mixed-use spaces, you're creating only a commercial space. It's dead at night. I mean, this is logic. I mean, we don't have to be like some great this thing. So you have cause and effect. And if the planning is not correct, I'm sorry to say this, and I know one of the biggest problems is there are many agencies. So you have MSRDC doing the Versova-Bandra Sea Link, you'll have BMC doing the coastal road, you have MMRDA doing the metros. Okay? And these agencies don't talk to each other, and you have many other agencies. And as a result of that, there's a lot of loss and waste in the system. And someone like Stalin has to probably fight against one and then fight against another. If we are saying, why can't this be done? It's because some other agency is not there. You have a Mahalakshmi. Now, Mr. Rajiv, very clear example of MMRDA planning. MMRDA has planned a monorail and a metro. At Mahalakshmi station, which was built in 1867, we have a monorail station coming at 2012 or 2014 at Jacob Circle, at Arthur Road Jail. And you have a metro station, which is also designed by the MMRDA, coming at the Vivera building, Satrasta, slightly south of Satrasta. So you have these three things all over the place. There's no interconnectivity, there's no last mile ever thought of. So there's a complete lack in planning there. I mean, we've given so many solutions for it because it's like a lack of planning by the same agency within an area 100 years after the happening. And if you're looking at metro projects per se, you have an underground metro in South Bombay, and all the metros in North Bombay are overground because three-wheelers are allowed there, you know, and things like that. So you're cutting trees and you're having overground metros with no interconnectivity. You'll see several stations where there's zero connectivity. So there's no planning in terms of exchanges. So I really think it starts off with good design. If you design well, you really don't have to fight the environment or anything else. You can work with it.
Talent, should I give Mr. Rajiv?
Yes, I just have to say this, if Mr. Rajiv permits, or I'll wait, whatever.
Yeah, Mr. Stalin, go ahead.
See, this is a city which has let its children down. Your children, our children, do not have spaces to play. And the existing family open spaces are kept out of bounds for people. For example, Vihar Lake. I remember I am taken my child to Vihar Lake when he was a kid. And such a beautiful place. Children used to love their families, used to come, they used to see the lake, they used to go back. for the last 20 years, it has been cut off from public view. Even same in the Powai Lake area. They're saying it's a terrorist threat. Now, which terrorist is going to buy a ticket and enter that lake and go and dump something into it when you can easily deliver it through a drone 1 kilometer away? This is all rubbish. What I'm trying to say, natural spaces must be made accessible to children, to people, to families. Only then can they protect. If you deprive people using the ban method, it is not going to help. We are losing our natural spaces. And our children deserve playgrounds. Nobody can take away the right, the inherent right of the child to play freely. Tell me how many athletes has the city produced in the last 25 years? How many? Zero. So what are we talking about? We can't give our children a better than that is a reflection of how we treat our society.
And the first thing in the lockdown, the first thing they do is they close all open spaces, gardens and beaches. Personally, don't understand the logic of closing down open spaces, gardens and beaches in a lockdown, when in fact they're open spaces where people can distance and it's not like a closed environment. And establishments are on, but the open spaces are closed. So my children can't go to school. They can't enjoy open spaces, neither can we. And it's, I think, very bad for people who have very little also in tight houses. They don't close bars.
Mr. Rajiv can help us get more spaces for children. And
okay, Stalin, bear with me one thing. When I was Additional Municipal Commissioner, Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai, I had developed 100 gardens in this city. Nobody talks about it.
No, playgrounds.
Neither you talk about it.
No, playgrounds.
Who is going? Yeah, I'm telling you. See, in one tenure, if you develop 100 gardens in this city, I have proof of that.
No,
how was it earlier and how did it look when it got developed? 100 gardens in this city. What I'm saying is that we are talking about the role of Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai, but unfortunately, we do not have anyone representing Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai here. So we should not talk about something which is in the realm of Municipal Corporation and still nobody, you are not getting answers from them. So basically, we should not talk about it. Unfortunately, Mr. Allen was saying that the cycle track was a failure. There have been 250. I think you are talking about the old cycle track which was constructed. The new cycle track which has been constructed, there were 250 cyclists in one day, and you go on Twitter for them and see how did they celebrate the cycle track and they praise the cycle track. I'm sorry, Mr. Allen, you come and walk with me.
No, I'm talking about BKC being a failure.
Come and walk with me on the cycle track. Cycle with me on that cycle track
now,
and you will understand the difference.
So I plan cycle tracks.
Unfortunately, I'm not that negative as you are. Okay, I'm not that negative as you are.
We'll see the cycle track in a month.
I'm not pessimistic as you are. Unfortunately, you are very
I'm not pessimistic at all.
Yeah,
I think design is easy.
You are pessimistic, Mr. Allen, and
no,
you
not
have
at all.
to be optimistic what we are doing in city.
I'm very optimistic, but after...
Okay, let me speak. I didn't speak when you were speaking. Okay, so please bear with me. Now I'm talking about the multimodal integration below every metro stations. The 2 lines which are getting inaugurated this year are going to have multimodal integration under every metro station. Okay, where you have a public sharing system of be it cycles or be it taxis, even bus stops, everything will get integrated below the cycle track, and it is planned, properly planned, and it is getting executed at present. Central line with the western line, all the metro stations with the commercial complexes, the FOBs to the commercial complexes, everything is getting integrated. It takes time.
Are these plans available online?
Why should you go and such a heavy files? We should make it available online. You ask questions, we'll give you answers. You ask questions, I'll give you answers. You come to us, we'll show you all the plans of multimodal integration. International consultants are involved, international architects are involved. Ignorance is bliss, Mr. Allen, but not always, okay? What I'm saying is that you come, we'll share with you all the plans, and I will be glad that it is getting documented. The way Mr. Chirodev Chaudhary is documenting, I will invite him to document the infrastructure development history of this city. It is getting created. The history is getting created today. After 3 years, 4 years, Mumbai will be a different city altogether. When all the metros will be operational, Mumbai will be a different city. City will get decongested. We have a study of it. 9 to 10% of congestion will go away with 2 metros getting inaugurated this year. So gradually, the congestion which is there on the road by 70-75% will get reduced to 33%, which is a Tokyo standard. So it's futuristic. We are in a chaotic situation. We are developing all these infrastructure against the flow of traffic. But still, you should give credit to the execution level. How many accidents have taken place? We are in the midst of all these roads, in the middle of the road, we are doing it. How many people have died? Nothing. Not a single accident has taken place. So
why should they die? No, I'm sorry, that's not an argument.
So the point,
that's not an argument. You should not even discuss this. You have to plan properly so no one dies. I'm sorry.
Sorry. You said that we are not doing underground. We are doing above ground. Okay, we are doing above ground because
may I ask why?
Yeah, because we are a poor city. We are not having income. You do not give me. Yeah, I do not get any money from state government or central government. Let me tell you, MMRDA doesn't take any money from central government and state government to execute all these infra projects. We do not take a single pie tax from you for that. Right? You should know that.
I pay my taxes.
You should know that. You should know that. You should know that, Mr.
But I know that the seafront, to be on the sea face, you need a four-wheeler. You cannot go to the airport in a rickshaw. You need a car. You cannot go on the sea link on a cycle, on a bike. You need a four-wheeler. Everyone will want a four-wheeler to be on the sea face.
Jane is talking about 2030. Wait for that time. If you and myself, we are there alive that time, we'll see that city, that day. Okay?
Okay, I think
that's my challenge to you.
Thank you, Mr. Rajiv. Alan, I think everyone has got a chance to share their thoughts.
Jane, don't you think the government should be transparent with its plans and put it out for everyone to? I should not be invited alone to see a plan. It should be open to everybody, right? It's democracy.
Transparency
there should not be opacity
that I should come to your home and explain it to you.
Don't have to.
Rajiv sir, that's not what he asked for it to be uploaded. If it is uploaded, there is no hassle at all.
Absolutely no hassle.
As simple as that. Why are we getting personal and getting upset?
You remember we went for the metro meeting and we asked for the plans and we never got the plans. This is how many years back?
We are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, our websites are there. You go and see. Every day we update on the infrastructure projects. Do you follow that?
Of course, you say this package is over, this paneling is over. We follow that. Yeah, we know that. Yeah,
you do, Stalin. You do, Stalin. I'm not saying, but I'm asking Alan.
Yes, I do. And for example, I speak directly to Aditya. Aditya has probably spoken to you. They didn't have a pedestrian link along the coastal road, and now it's happening at Haji Ali and at Wali Seaface. At Lotus, thanks to us.
We are linking.
There is no pedestrian connectivity.
Pedestrian also here.
Sat Rasta, for example, is not Sat Rasta, it's Art Rasta. It's something we have brought forward, and the BMC was like, huh? They didn't know. And now our underpasses, they've turned into overpasses, and they're cutting 267 trees for. I do follow things. I'm not ignorant. I'm sorry. And I'm a designer. I do know good design. And unfortunately, you're not open to dialogue. You're being very defensive.
Alan, let me tell you one thing. Let me tell you one thing. It's only MMRDA which has got an urban design cell as a department. No other organization in this city has got one urban design cell department. We have one. We have in-house expertise to design things, and we are doing. We have just started. Okay.
Excellent. Please explain why the monorail and the metro at least don't meet if both were designed by the MMRDA.
Two people have things to say. Let's just give this to everyone. Sir, Dhaval wants to add something, and then Manisha ji.
I had a chance to attend the Mumbai Metro Line 6 public hearing, and we gave a lot of suggestions on how to make the line better. So which was noted by your officials over there, but they said they'll get back to us, but they never got back to us. That's not the issue that I'm raising here. I'm just saying that a public government body collaboration would make because you have your perspective, the public has their perspective. We're not critical of what you have planned, but we just want it to be that every rupee should have maximum utilization of that rupee spent. So similarly, example for cycling tracks, about 2 days back on Andheri flyover, there was an accident of a cyclist where he had a L1 column compression, the fracture was there, and where the accident happened, right next to that there was a CCTV, but it was not functional. So if we can have a kind of projects like schools take up audit of school children take up audits of such infrastructure, and they get some marks on such audits, this will bring up a very good public-private partnership of whether the infrastructure that is money is being spent, whether it is actually performing to the levels that it should. Because you spoke very widely about cycling tracks. Like cycling tracks are something where the cars or the tempos or any vehicular motorized traffic, if it comes inside the cycling lane, can cause a lot of damage to the human life.
Mr. Rajiv, so I think what Stalin, Alan, and Dhaval are saying is that we probably need a little more transparency from that of the authorities.
Jane, let me tell you, Jane, we are the most transparent organization so far as information sharing is concerned. The thing is that there are ways of sharing information. One, there are RTIs, people can ask questions, and we share all the informations on that count. Number two, if you ask for come and show us your plans, we show our plans to them. At the same time, see, all these projects are on an evolving pattern. Okay, when metros were designed earlier and they started execution and public hearings were taking place, that time we had not decided about the multimodal integration, which we have added now. And now what Mr. Dhaval is talking about is that it should get connected to the Western Line, suburban stations and everything. That is happening. We have even developed a policy of that if any commercial complex is asking for a connectivity from the metro station, we are giving that connectivity and in a PPP mode to them. They will share their cost in their area, and rest of the public space, we will be sharing our cost of that FOB. And all this connectivity, so that the commuters don't have to come down on the road and then travel it. They can directly go to those commercial complexes, to the shopping malls, to other housing colonies, if the developer wants to get it connected. So all these things, all these policies are in public domain, and it has been published also. We have given publication to this policy. We have invited proposals from the commercial complexes and shopping malls, housing colonies for that. I'm sorry if somebody doesn't come to know about it. That doesn't mean that we are not transparent on that count. And you are most welcome. In fact, I'll be very glad to discuss with Mr. Allen about the urban design concept, which he has in his mind about the city. But there are so many urban designers, they don't come forward and share their views to us also. They should also be that much proactive and transparent in their
Alan,
ideas.
that is your next appointment now. Maybe you can do that. Yes.
He is most welcome. I invite him to come forward and share.
Very happy to have.
Manisha ji, you had something to say, and then I'm going to take the last thoughts from Chirodeep, who has been fairly quiet through this before we end.
Actually, we have moved a bit forward, but the point which I originally wanted to make was this concern that was raised as to whether the coastal road would change the coastal alignment and the high tide line. So no, it doesn't. It is very clearly mentioned in the coastal road clearance that the high tide lines and the coastal, the alignment remains the same. So a property or an area or an open space which was hitherto unbuildable doesn't become buildable because the coastal road has been built. Exactly. So that was just the point I wanted to make. But well, yes, I think now I'm more and more convinced that the role of my department is to actually bring these two sites together so as to ensure that infra and development happens, but not at the cost of environment, but rather in sync with environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. Chirodeep, you have anything to add to this?
Well, I'm actually really touched and really surprised that somebody heard my plea of documenting. So I think I'd love to kind of take up Mr. Rajiv on his offer. Maybe a plans can be drawn up. I mean, I heard you're going to be retiring soon. Maybe we do that kind of with a lot of haste, because these things I think would be nicer to get moving before. But I think as much as a lot of the work which I mean both sides are talking about, which is really about a vision thing for the city. I think the documentation thing that I've been harping on for many years now, I think requires, an equal amount of vision in terms of, like I was saying, how are we going to be remembering our city? I mean, the city that we are kind of forgetting as the development is happening so fast around us. So hopefully there'll be opportunities for that. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Rajiv, you might have to be prepared for a lot of appointments that are coming your way.
They are most welcome. In fact, the gain of today is that I got Mr. Chirodip and Mr. Alan to share their to know, learn from them and to implement if they have something new.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. You need open spaces. So please, since you've developed 100 gardens, I'm sure you understand this. But I know it's some logistics. Someone has made a rule somewhere saying gardens and beaches are closed. So it's very weird.
Yes, it's the BMC, unfortunately, and we do not have the BMC here today to share this.
I think people need to be in touch with nature to appreciate the environment, to appreciate things. Sure. And, these are the important things in life. They are the luxuries.
Thank you so much, everybody. And it was lovely having all of you here. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Subscribe to Midday India. Get direct notifications on all our videos by clicking on the bell icon.